Hello, Africa. How you doing? So, as I said, I'm here at the Lorries 2019 Creative Week, and I'm taking you behind the scenes, getting to meet some of the personalities you'd normally on an average day not get to meet. So, Anne, welcome.
Thank you, Stuart.
Africa, or wherever you are, if you're streaming, this is your opportunity to ask questions. And in your daytime job, in your daytime capacity, what do you do?
Wonderful question. So I serve as the UN Women, and UN Women stands for United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. It's important to specify that. We're one of the newest UN agencies. We've only been in existence for 10 years.
Okay.
It'll be 10 years next year.
All right.
And so, as the United Nations Women, we are responsible to establish, to set and enable nations to implement global commitments and global standards. So, we have conventions that governments abide by and so on. So that's sort of in general what we do, but specifically, we then look at a country and say, what does this country need to get done in this regard? And what are areas where we can really shift the bar for women in particular and the issue of gender equality?
Mm-hmm.
So we do several things. We look at women in the economy, and the economy of South Africa or of Africa in general sits in the hands of mainly men, led by men, whether in private sector or in public sector, and yet so many women are the farm workers, women are the informal sector traders, they're the ones who are running households and ensuring that there's food on the table, they're the ones who are, just basically pulling the economy together in the underbelly of the economy.
That's right.
But don't get the opportunity that's on the table.
Mm.
So some of what I do is really do a lot of representational advocacy work, working with government, working with the private sector, saying, you have a responsibility as a government. If this government has 3.1 trillion rand worth of an economy, 1.2 of that goes to you buying goods and services from businesses, but only less than 10% of that goes to women.
That's
buy
right.
from women.
Yeah.
Buy from women, buy food from them to supply schools, buy food from them to supply the military, buy, contracts in the transport sector. Let them do the logistics. Let them even go into energy and construction and big, because what it does, we have evidence that when one woman earns or runs a successful business, she will employ more people, and generally the reach in community is much greater.
Much greater,
and in truth, most of our economies have missed this story.
Yeah.
When they talk about economic growth, they then focus on big industry, mining, and so on as a source of growth. Those kinds of industries right now are shedding jobs.
Yeah, they are.
The jobs are being created at the small level. A person running a laundry, as we saw the other day in Namibia, or a woman who's growing vegetables, she's employing one more person, two more people. So you create jobs in that sense. So we look at that, but we find, and so we see all kinds of barriers to that. And some of the barriers are just stereotypes that are held by owners of business and leaders in the public sector. So what we're doing here, which is very exciting right now, is we're establishing the South Africa chapter of what we call at UN Women the Unstereotype Alliance.
Say that again. It's called the Unstereotype
Alliance.
Okay. Tell me more. What does it do?
So I was just talking about how in the private sector and the public sector, there's trillions that are available, but yet barely 10% of it goes to women. Why? Because the stereotypes are that men who are owners of businesses are the sort of natural ones who are skilled and equipped to do this work. So they already stereotype against women, and so women are excluded from the opportunity. Okay?
Yeah.
But in the same breath, this world that's here at the Luries is advertising and marketing and film and TV.
That's exactly it. I was actually going to jump into that.
Yeah, so you, as you're doing now, you shape culture. You shape the mindsets of people. You can throw out an ad about, a sexy woman to sell a car.
Yeah.
And men, buyers of the cars, associate this car with getting women. You know?
Okay, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Whereas you could, you know, if you were to create a different image, you know, you have to decide what is the image that we want to create out there, instead of reinforcing the kind of stereotypes that continue to portray women in a very negative way,
Yeah.
sexualizing them, you know, sort of locking them into the kind of gender stereotypical work that they do. So you'll always see a woman advertising, I don't know, dishwashing soap.
That's right.
And then a man will be, you know, in the ad for a big bank with CEOs.
Yeah.
And those images, you know, imagine all the young people who are watching this.
True.
That's what they see.
That's what they
These
see,
are the
and
role
those are the
models.
roles.
This is what they think. This is where their destiny is.
Right.
And so if we can really start unstereotyping how we portray these images, it starts changing the narrative.
Yeah.
And it will change them in terms of work and economic opportunity, but also in terms of what we call toxic masculinities, harmful masculinities.
Yeah.
Violence is rife in a lot of this region.
Yeah.
Gender violence, sexual violence, trafficking, these are things which are growing and increasing exponentially. And a lot of it has to do with identity. You know?
Yeah.
You know, I'm a man, and if I'm going to show and prove that I'm a man, you know, I will take the power from the woman from her body. And so some of the, you know, with your ads, some of the ads that people put out there reinforce the stereotype.
That's right.
You could actually create an image of what's that kind of man that we really want in this society, you know? And start shifting him away that when you drink alcohol, you know, it's not about getting the babe.
Yeah.
It's about, you know, how to honor her and how to treat her with respect and so on. So we can create all kinds of images. It's up to us as a society and collectively to decide that. So this alliance is really trying to galvanize everybody that we can bring here from this whole community.
Right.
So we're calling on companies to come and join us, and both advertising companies, but also the clients.
Yeah.
And come in and join this alliance, become a member, and we will then equip you with the tools. And we have a playbook of tools, and we'll use those tools. You can then use those tools to really learn how to unstereotype. It begins with you, though, Stuart.
Yeah.
If you're biased in the way you think about men and women and relationships,
Right.
you will do exactly what we see today, which is you will continue to stereotype this.
Yeah.
So some of the playbook, the tools, are also challenging some of those unconscious bias and causing you to have to pay attention to how you personally stereotype. You have to challenge that to start shifting the ball game. So we want young people to be hopeful about this future. We want them to know that they can have an equal stake, an equal share in this economy, because that's their right. And for young women, they shouldn't be sitting there thinking there is no hope for me because I'm a girl.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So this, so in my work, this is what I do. I go to places like this, and I try to bring on lots of partnerships and talk to different people, and sell some of these ideas, and you know. But ultimately, we're dealing with changing nations, changing continent, changing globally, and so we have to take on these big agendas. And so it's a question of finding who are the key people.
Yeah, I love that. So learned quite a lot in that intro. Thank you very much. Unstereotypical, right? That is an alliance that you pulled together.
Unstereotype, yeah.
Unstereotype
alliance,
yeah. And that's why I was pretty surprised when I came here to the Lorries, and I'm like, oh, the UN women are here, and yet this is a creative industry. This is supposed to be about advertising industry, etc. I love the fact that you're reaching out, you're coming to where they are to have these types of conversations. That's commendable. Now, when we think about bias and we think about how it influences us, again, LinkedIn predominantly, most people know it about jobs, etc. One of the things that people could change is the adverts that go out to seek people for jobs, right?
Yeah.
So it starts with those types of images that need to be influenced and changed.
Well, some of it is about the images. Some of it is about really reaching in to the HR practitioners who do recruitment.
Okay.
And you know, one of the big things we're pushing with companies, so we've got several initiatives, and stereotype is one. Another one is what we call the women empowerment principles.
Okay.
And
Tell me about
these
that.
are 7 principles that private sector companies sign up to. So right in we've got Vodacom as a member, we've got Unilever, and so these different companies sign up and they commit to these 7 principles.
Okay.
And these principles include ensuring that you have parity in leadership, ensuring that you have a safe environment where women will thrive, so sexual
Right.
harassment is dealt with,
Yes.
any forms of violence. You're looking at equal access to rights in HR practice. So recruitment is, you have equal access.
Right.
And because men have been advantaged in access to jobs, there has to be an equity conversation about how do we lift more women.
Yeah.
And so you actually have to prefer them. You actually have to have affirmative recruitment practices.
That's right. To
that
bring
that
out the balance,
bringing
right?
women in more and more.
Yes.
But it does start with a commitment from the champion.
Right.
And so we speak to the champion. This champion is a CEO. He signs on the dotted line and says, this is my commitment. And so that has to be translated into the recruitment practices. So for you at LinkedIn, and for people who are in LinkedIn, what we want to do is to be able to start, inviting you to start thinking about how do we make more women and more young people get attracted to this.
Right.
Because in some ways, as I look at it, and of course I'm a LinkedIn member, so as I scan through, you don't see bias on the surface. It just looks like it's a job ad.
Yeah.
But I know that I haven't had the exposure that you have had in the same industry because I've been disadvantaged as a woman.
Right.
And so I will apply, but if I apply and compete with you, and there's no preference for me that recognizes that I haven't had the same starting point as you did, then I don't stand a chance.
So I see a little bit of bias even from a
Absolutely.
woman's perspective.
Absolutely.
We did a recent study around gender and how women find jobs compared to men. Some of the statistics that we've been seeing is that when women do apply for jobs, they're more likely to get them. When women do negotiate and ask for salaries that are higher or more, they do tend to get them, but that there's not enough women asking and demanding that kind of benefit or that kind of allowance.
Yeah.
So the bias, does it also exist within women?
Absolutely.
A stereotype that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is my point about equity. I had a very interesting potential job offer some years back. And, I sort of started asking around, what's the kind of package that one could get for this job?
Right.
And the numbers I got were so shocking because it would have been like double or triple what I earned before.
Right.
And I remember feeling, do I have the right to ask that? Isn't that being greedy?
The imposter syndrome kicked in,
And
right?
so I had a conversation with my husband and I said to him, can you believe this? This is the kind of money that they talk about.
Yeah.
So he said, go for it. Of course that's what it would be. Of course you would do that. And he was, for him it was no thing.
Yeah.
And so I bravely went into that room and they asked me what my expectations were.
Right.
And I shot at that 3 times number. And
Yeah.
I thought, no, what do I have to lose? The most they'll say to me is no, we'll, sort of bring it down.
That's right.
And they actually says, that sounds about right. And inside I'm just like, wow.
Whoa.
So in truth,
Yeah.
because, there's a famous sort of research quote that we talk about all the time, and I don't know who did the research, but it's quite impressive, that is, that when men apply for jobs,
Yeah.
they only need to have 10% of the experience for that job to have the guts to apply for it.
To apply for it, right?
A woman will wait until she has 90% of that work already done before she will apply.
Wow.
So the bias is right there.
The bias is right there,
So,
yeah.
so I look at a job and I think, have I done that? A man will look at a job and say, I've done a little bit of this, so I'm sure I can do the rest.
I'm sure I can figure out the
I'll
rest.
figure out the rest. So that's where a bias like that begins.
Right. So it does begin with women
begins-
as well,
yes.
as much as it does with men.
Well, we obviously have lived in an ecosystem, an environment that has given us those stereotypes that we can't You know, we don't have the rights. And so there's a lot of work that we do that is about really getting companies to invest in the women in their organizations so that they can step up.
So we need to celebrate the women that have stepped up, the women that have grown into those positions, etc., which will then in turn drive confidence to those that follow behind. Is that what you say?
That if we haven't, you know, and a lot of this was being discussed in the meeting today, was that if you haven't really seen it, you almost can't imagine it.
True.
Now, we have all over the world, you know, huge Fortune 500 companies, and it's barely 3/4 women, maybe 5 women CEOs.
Yeah.
In South Africa, there's about 3 of them, you know. So when you sit there and think to yourself, could I be a CEO? And you're thinking, but every image that I see doesn't look like it. And so a lot of what we're doing at UN Women is to really ask, you know, really invite men who sit at the top there. You know, we talk about pushing through the glass ceiling.
Yeah.
We want them throwing boulders through that ceiling and break
Shatter it, right?
Shatter it from the top.
Right.
So that I then have an open door instead of keeping on trying to push up against a wall that I can't access.
Right.
So it's both. So we do our work, but you know, you as a leader has a huge responsibility, and that's, you know, it's exciting because we see companies taking the step and actually making it happen.
True.
And when the leader says, I'm inviting you as a company to come to me and let's find programs that we can invest in our company, then women step up.
Then women do step up.
Because the space is given to them. Because other than that, they're sitting there and they're thinking, it's a boys' club. I don't, you know, not everybody has the kind of just chutzpah from their upbringing to just step into a space that has 50 men.
Yeah, that's right.
Talking about beer and chicks and what, and then I must step into that space and try to have a conversation, and I crack a joke and they don't take me seriously.
Right.
Women there were saying that a woman in a boardroom will crack a joke and nobody laughs. And the guy cracks the same joke and it's ha 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 ha. Jeremy, that was a great conversation, you know? So
I'm laughing at your joke right now, so
really,
I'm past that bias and stereotype.
But yeah.
Yeah, so it really starts with you as an individual, and right now if you're joining the stream, I'm talking to Anne. She's representing UN Women, which is a fairly new body, which is 10 years old, you mentioned?
10 years.
And it's strange, well, I found it strange at first to find the UN here at an institution or at a place where we've got a lot of commercial organizations. But like you said, it's about reaching out, finding these commercial organizations in the places they're comfortable and changing the narrative. And I think the Lorries has really been about how do we change the story and how do we change the world?
Yeah.
Now, it starts with you. We said it starts with having the conversations, and that the conversations are not limited just to the men, but also to the women. What are you guys doing to go a little bit below the professional line and start talking to the youth, start talking to schools, universities? Are you reaching out at that level?
We definitely are. And you know, like for instance with this Stereotype Alliance, one of the ideas we've been discussing is about taking these stereotypes. You know, I don't know how many of these videos you've seen, but if you think about ads that you've seen,
right?
You know, we were partnering with Dove, so Dove is showing the strength of a woman, and there's other ads that really show how the bias plays out in ads.
Right.
And we are very excited to sort of work through a kind of campaign that will get young people in schools to start actually, you know, running competitions and getting them to actually look at how stereotype plays out in their lives.
Right.
But I mean, we work with them in other sectors, like we work with young women leaders, and we have across Africa we've got something called the Africa Women Leaders Network. And the Africa Women Leaders Network is really about getting women to, and there's a young women's sort of chapter of the Africa Women Leaders Network.
Right.
And these young women, just last week, it was over the weekend, they had a retreat with very senior women in the UN and across Africa. They had people like Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. In fact, it was chaired by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and hosted by President Kenyatta, Uhuru Kenyatta in Kenya. And this conversation was between young women, many young women from across the continent, and these older women having an intergenerational conversation.
Right.
And the young women were challenging everything that our generation does, and
Right.
basically saying you're selling us out, you're not pushing hard enough, and so on.
Yes.
So I was sharing in this unstereotyped conversation earlier that in truth, young people view us as sometimes being a barrier, like gatekeepers of these relationships with men.
Right.
But in truth, we were not there when we were young. We didn't have permission to be in that space.
That's right.
So
right.
we've pushed also, but they're now sitting in positions that we were never imaginable in our time.
True, true.
And so we've broken some barriers.
And there's others to be.
And it's time for them to also now push through new barriers.
Right.
And each time it's progress. So yeah, we do work with young people. We work with universities on ending gender-based violence in universities. We've been working across Africa on ending child marriage. It's a big issue, and there's lots of young women who have been child brides, or young women who have been survivors of FGM, and
Right.
many of them sort of getting involved in this conversation about ending harmful practice across. And again, we go back to the issue of norms and stereotypes.
Right.
And the reason why UN Women is here is after years of working with just women,
Yeah.
in terms of empowering one another and sort of running our programs, we've started to look at where is this culture created? Where is this culture created?
Yeah. What's the source?
And this is the message to the young people. Let's find where the culture is created, and let's go into those spaces, and let's challenge them to start shifting around those stereotypes.
Right.
So,
right.
so this whole community at the Luries is one big community. There's lots of young people in there.
Right.
And many of them were talking about fatigue with fighting in the workplace.
Yeah.
And I was saying to them, we would not have been in the room like you are 30, 40 years ago.
30, yeah.
So now that you are in the room,
Yes.
you may be fatigued, but trust me, we are doing everything we can to get that boulder through the
glass
through
ceiling.
the glass
yeah,
ceiling,
Yeah.
so that you have space to rise.
True.
And we just have to keep at it.
Yeah.
We can't give up. We have to keep at it. And so for young people, I know there's frustration about the fact that this is taking too long, it's too slow, our methods are old and dated, and it's great. We have a
Yeah.
place, and young people are coming through with new skills and new talents, and we're challenged to grow this out even further. So in the schools, in the universities, there have been huge tension around, misogyny on campus, but also just how leadership at universities deal with these issues, and the fact that they hide things under the carpet and they don't necessarily treat these things head on. And they've been fighting huge battles.
Right.
And taking them on. And so there's new forms of activism. And so part of what we've been doing is mobilizing principals of universities, vice chancellors, and saying to them, we want you to be he for she.
Yeah.
We want you to be in solidarity with women's empowerment in your university.
In your universities.
And we have a couple of African universities that are part of this. And so we're pushing them to say, change that behavior at your university. So that, again, we can talk to the top. So we talk to the top and we say, you have the responsibility to do this.
Right.
But from under, you have to keep pushing.
You have to keep
so that
pushing.
eventually we will. So, there's many opportunities for us to find this space. I mean, we work in taverns where the culture of misogyny and violence just is pervasive. We go
Right.
to bars and shebeens and
Yes.
and this is what happens. You walk in and wearing jeans or whatever, it's suggestive. And
Yeah.
therefore, by the time I'm done with the day, I will likely have had some form of forced and sexual
Forced
encounter.
attention, yeah, that I'm not
But we're
keen
working
on.
with them as he for she taverns and saying to them, let's change the behavior in there.
Yeah.
And the men are talking to the men, and the men are talking to one another and saying, is this the kind of society we want to create?
Yeah.
And we found some of them really taking this issue so seriously that they've gone on to deal with situations of violence. In fact, in one case, it was a murder that had been unresolved for about 3 years.
Okay.
And we went and identified a man, and we said, we remember you were in our bar with that woman, and that's the last time you were seen. And that man is behind bars today.
Oh, wow.
By other men.
Yes.
And many of these are really young. These are young people who are involved in these conversations. You know, these are men in their mid-20s and so on. So, and it's changed so much that they're starting to create new value system in those spaces.
In those spaces.
And they're saying, which was the most interesting fact here, that their bars are doing better.
Oh, wow.
They're actually doing better as a result.
So it has a direct implication on your profit lines, etc.
It's the same thing. Unstereotyped ads are doing better. The revenue is higher. Products are actually more successful.
Yeah.
And because women are such a big power in terms of consumption, consumer power.
That's right.
They actually are doing better. They talk about literally 25% increase in revenue targets as a result of unstereotyping. So.
I love the fact that you're also leading with data to make the point carry weight. Taking you back to the workplace, right, and the work environment, if I was just to ask you, and thinking specifically around Africa, if I was to put 10 HR leaders in front of you today, how many of those would be women and how many of those would be men? I'm just checking my own bias here.
I think that HR is quite biased towards women.
That's right. So why is it then, if I can carry on with the question, why is it then that the women, like you said, who are running HR are biased and are still bringing in more men for the leadership position than they are bringing women?
Well, I mean, there's a system for how you recruit.
Okay.
If you advertise for a CEO and you're an HR person and you're looking for, you know, there's a job description, and that job description says, you know, 10 years experience in senior level management, you know, an MBA and da 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 da. You already bias the selection.
Okay.
Because the people who have already been with this established high level 10 years or whatever will be men.
Okay, okay.
So where we've been seeing some shift is where those recruiters are saying, just like we do here with Black Economic Empowerment.
Right.
If you don't push some bias and start saying that we want to find women who may not have 10 years, but have 4 years, who we can start preparing to take on this position.
Right.
With our he for she universities program, it was a very interesting example that was used at Wits University, where they wanted to have more women because they're looking for gender parity.
Right.
And the only way to do this is to get more women tenured. But the problem is you've got these old profs who are not interested in giving this up. And so what they did was to take this huge investment and invest in creating a new layer of tenured professors who are at the entry level, who are being mentored by the older tenured professors.
Okay.
With the goal of moving them up and having them stand side by side through this process. Because otherwise you're not going to change at this time of our lives.
Yeah.
And so there have to be very deliberate efforts by HR practitioners to say, we actually have to bias towards more women.
Right.
Because as you know, I mean, if we used our existing systems and our existing bias to recruit board members, we would never find a single woman. But because there has been affirmative action requirements that you have to have, you know, 30%, like there's a 30% club that exists that is a global program.
Right.
You must have 30% women on the board. Companies are forced to do this. And once they do this, they see results in revenue, in bottom line.
That's it.
So it won't happen unless a deliberate effort is made. So you know, women are part of this system. We're not outside of it. You know, the system of patriarchy, we are all part of it, right?
That's right.
But breaking out of it is about a couple of things. One, if we get CEOs to say, we have a policy of recruiting more women, then the HR person is encouraged and asked, how do you bias towards women?
Yeah.
And it gives them the opportunity to start asking those questions and start looking for biases and looking deeper into CVs.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's also lazy to just pick the same old people. It's easier to do that. And so people do that because they're under pressure. You have to recruit, you have to get them back.
We have to get people in by next month,
Just have to
yeah.
get, you know, and this is the same system.
Right.
So for us, everything we're doing, we're saying, with this women empowerment principles, you've got to challenge what is the norm. Stop normalizing gender inequality. It is not the right way to go.
Yeah.
And so let's look at an equal pay.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have an equal pay, and it ranges from 34% to 27% less that women earn. So you, my friend, will earn, I don't know, $100,000.
Right.
I will earn $75,000 in the exact same
same
position.
job, yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
I don't know, you don't have boobs, that's the only difference. What is the difference? Right? So, we are challenging companies and saying, you are going to have to break this.
Yeah.
Because what tends to happen is, I have started at a lower level just because the system itself is unequal.
Yeah.
Or I have had less opportunity, or I went into a system that was biased towards certain courses in the university.
Right.
And so I then get in at a lower level. And forever,
Yes,
my
sir.
salary history
Yeah.
determines where I go, right?
Right.
And so your salary history is already up there. Because, I don't know, you did economics, and I did, I don't know, humanities or some. And so in the process, we're never going to equalize.
Yeah.
Until a deliberate decision is made that we are pushing for equity. And so we're going to bias this so that we have more women. And what we will do is surround them with support. We will give them the skills. We will give them the mentoring. We will work with them. We will hold their hands until they're successful.
True.
Those are the companies that are producing better results.
Wow. And when you think about this narrative, as powerful as it is, I think it takes grassroots first at home
Yeah,
with the family.
absolutely.
By the way, if you don't mind, do you have kids?
3 kids.
Okay. How
Big
many boys and how many girls?
My firstborn is a son, he's 23.
Right.
And I have 2 daughters, one is 20, one is 18.
Awesome. I've got an 18-year-old. A bit of a handful, right?
Big handful, but they're fun.
They're fun.
To watch them grow.
So on that side, in terms of having that conversation with your children, how early do you start, and how do you have this type of conversation of, this is the world we're in, but this is where I believe you can change the narrative and how you can take hold of your destiny, your future as a child?
You know, there's 2 sort of answers to this. The one is model it,
Yeah.
right? And they say that women who are brought up in a household by a father who is present, who is loving, who is engaged in their lives and engaged in sharing responsibility for their upbringing, bring up the most stable, most successful, strongest women.
Okay. So
That's the first thing.
that's the first
Just
thing.
model it.
Father's role, just modeling
Just,
it,
yeah.
being present,
All of that.
being intentional.
Yeah, being a good guy. Don't beat up your you know. If I don't see my father if I've never seen my father touch my mother, why would I even imagine that that's a normal thing to experience in my own home?
Yeah.
And my son won't even relate to that because he doesn't know
He's
what that
never
is
seen
about.
it happen,
So
yeah.
the modeling is very, very important.
Okay.
And then obviously the constant sort of talking into them, talking to their lives that, you know, you have the right to be whoever you want.
Yeah.
We had an interesting conversation in the panel there about parenting.
Yeah.
And I was saying that I really think there needs to be a requirement that everybody who goes to a pregnancy clinic has to go through a parenting course.
Okay.
Because we are royally screwing up the world
Yeah,
by not
yeah.
having the right kinds of value system, being absent parents, families are torn up, and so, you know, generations are being produced that are not successful and are, you know, are pulled into alcoholism and are pulled into violence and so on. The biggest driver of gender violence in South Africa, the data shows us, is from child neglect.
Wow. Wow.
Not even from seeing the violence,
Yeah.
it's child neglect.
Just neglect.
That's parenting.
Not being present.
Not being present, not really caring, not really taking care. And just the neglect makes you one who, you know, you've got no model. You've got
Yeah.
nothing to show that this is what a successful parent or person should be like.
Wow. And I think some of that also goes into how we behave socially now as human beings, right? So a lot of us will spend time on devices, will spend time on consuming information, the smartphones, the data, the Wi-Fi, the applications, etc. It comes from being intentional that I'm in my home space.
Yeah.
The people I need to give attention to are these ones.
Yeah.
Because I spend the first 8 hours of my day,
If not more.
if not more,
Yeah.
with my working colleagues.
Yeah.
And that these people actually need modeling.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
They need modeling. And some of the modeling is about work. You know, I had an interesting experience when I was, my youngest daughter was young and she was in primary school. And lots of moms were not working.
Yeah.
And they were picking them up from school. She confronted me one day and she says, "Mommy, you're never there to pick me up at lunchtime." And I said to her, "I'm a working mom."
Yeah.
And this is what happens in society today.
Mm.
And so, you will likely be a working mom, and I'd love to be able to pick you up.
Yeah.
But I also, enjoy the fact that we've made a decision as a family that this is the kind of family that we're going to have.
Right.
And so I want you to love and respect the fact that I work.
Right.
And know that we can't all be the same.
Yeah.
So she sort of took it, and obviously I tried to find every moment I could to be present at school as well.
Right.
But what was interesting is that a few years later, maybe 2 or 3 years later, she somehow requested or persuaded the school to invite me to come and speak to moms about my work.
Right.
And it was such an ironic thing because many of the moms, as their kids were growing up and growing out of school and no longer needed them on a day-to-day basis every hour of the day,
Right.
they were now feeling a sense of loss of who am I and what's my identity beyond my children and so on. So we had this wonderful conversation about how do you balance all of that?
Yeah.
Is there a way to be a present parent and be a working mother as well? And there's no blueprint.
There isn't.
Give it the best shot you can.
That's right.
I grew up under a working mother who was a working mother plus a businesswoman, and she's ran over 10 enterprises in as long as I can recall.
Right.
And all of it was about making sure we got the best opportunity possible as kids.
And did your mother take you to work? Did you get to experience and see what it was like
I did,
in a
definitely.
work environment?
For sure. I mean, I definitely went. Actually, she was a secretary when she was younger, and I became an expert typist.
Yeah.
And she tells this story all the time.
Right. Tell me. I gotta hear this story.
About when I was about 12.
Okay.
I used to go after school. I would, whoever was, they were carpooling.
Right.
And I'd be dropped off at her office, and I would sit in her office and do homework. And this was some time ago,
Okay.
when we still had in Kenya, we still had white bosses.
Yeah.
And so he was some British guy.
Right.
She was working at the breweries, and I think he was a CEO or some big shot.
Right.
And I would be sitting there, and I know my mother to be a strong woman at home. And I would hear him walk in there, and he would say, "Mary, can I have a cup of tea?" And I was livid because I was like, "Who is this?" And my mother would scurry around and go grab this tea.
Go grab the tea and yeah.
And then she would come back and she'd be doing this typing, and she's saying to me, 100%, do your work and all of this stuff.
Right.
And then she'd finish work at 5. Our home was not far from her office, but we would then rush off to her business because she needed to go and close the business.
That's right.
And so we would go to the business, and then we'd eventually get home. And so that's how I did my homework, was all between all of this kind of work.
Yeah.
But one day I went to her office and I said to her, "Mommy, why would you accept to have this man call you all the time, 'Mary, can I have a cup of tea?' And then, so I did this whole thing. And I said, 'Mom, this can't be your life.'"
Right, right.
Well, did she not quit the same month?
Are you kidding me?
She quit her job.
12-year-old gets mom to
Quit her job and just went deep into enterprise.
Oh, wow.
And that's what she's done. To this day, she's
Wow.
82, she's still doing business.
I love that.
So, hey.
It's never too early to do the...
I suppose I remodeled her too. But I
Yeah.
couldn't stand to see this woman who was so powerful
Right.
be diminished like this. I couldn't deal,
Mm.
you know? And I used to see this man and I started loathing him.
Right.
Because I didn't like how he treated my mom.
That's right.
And I told him so one day.
Oh, wow. So a lot of companies, as I was going to say, is that they do have these programs where you bring the girl child to work or bring your small children to work, and it helps them shape their future and start seeing the world from a different lens. There's something fairly unique that we do at LinkedIn, which is bring your parents into the office, right? So
The Intern.
yeah, well,
The movie?
the movie The Intern, that's right.
Love that movie. Love that movie.
So our parents invest in who we are, right? So they invest in our education, they try and shape us, they try and mold us. We bring them in so they can get a sense of, one, pride, of course, of how you turned out, but also to get to see how the workplace has changed. And if I think about just how life is, I kind of feel like grandparents were made so that, you know, children would have someone to talk to, because they tend to have more time for the children. They tend to tolerate a lot more than you as a parent. What are you doing to engage the older generation so that when they do have time with these young ones, they're seeing things from a new lens? Not what they went through, but seeing it from a new lens.
You know, I don't even know that we really need to do anything with the older generation, because the young ones educate them themselves.
Okay, okay.
And what we've seen, you know, like I'm saying, even for me, I was brought up in a particular way. And, you know, I grew up with very clear expectations of what my parents wanted and how I would behave and the choices I would make. And there was very little leeway outside of those sort of boundaries.
That's right.
I mean, I pushed the
You
boundaries.
push the
quite a bit,
boundaries, yeah?
but even within, you know, it was definitely within closed boundaries, right? My kids are challenging all of that.
Yeah.
They're
There is no
breaking all,
boundaries.
they're stereotyping it all. So you push those boundaries, and they're
Yeah.
like, but why?
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And so what I find now is that even with my grandparents, you know, and when my mother-in-law and my mother are at our home very
Right.
often, and as my children are interacting with them, you know, initially they would sort of say, you know, you can't dress like that, or you can't talk like that, or you can't, you know, and they're trying their old school way of doing things.
That's right.
And the kids are like, but why not?
Why not?
But why not, Grandma?
Yeah.
And Grandma, but you see, this is how we see this thing.
Mm.
And so I think what I have seen is very interesting education that happens by the young ones to the grandparents themselves.
Mm.
And I think at that age, you've lived enough to be able to be open enough
Yeah.
to sort of receive this, which is why grandparents sort of mellow out at that point, because
Right.
you know, you've been through the school of hard knocks, and you've seen that some things have worked.
Some things have worked, some
have
haven't.
not.
Yeah.
And so you have to have an openness, otherwise you don't have a relationship.
Mm.
And you know, so my children sometimes would say, you know, we can't have this relationship if this is how you're going to see things.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And it's open, they're telling
So
you like
you
it is.
then have to sort of sit back and listen.
Yeah.
You know, in our days, there was no interaction as much. I mean, my mother, yes, but my father, it was a no, that was it, you know.
Mm.
But I think the idea of bringing, you know, your parents to work and kind of having this interaction is very cool, you know. We've actually done that, where as reps like I am, like at my level, who are sort of the heads of offices in different African countries, we've brought some of our moms into a space where we start having conversations with them
Right.
and asking them what are their thoughts about women in leadership and women leading. And for them, it's leadership not in authority necessarily in an organization and so on, but some of it is just about, you know, what was your value system? What do you believe? What are you willing to challenge or not challenge? You know, what's the society that you sort of are shaping? And it's really interesting just to watch the generations.
Yeah.
The young ones are really impatient, and I think it's great that we bring in new generations all the time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we say at UN Women that it's 217 years away from gender equality. If we continue at the pace we continue.
How long is that? 200?
217 years.
So it won't be something that we will see in our lifetime.
Unless you're going to be 217 plus whatever age you are.
No, No, I've got other plans. Yeah. don't
So we
think
will not see gender equality.
We won't see it in our lifetime.
We won't see it in our lifetime.
But
Your kids
we will.
Your kids may not see it in their lifetime.
Right.
My point is, at the current pace.
The pace at which we're
So
going
we have a responsibility to change that pace.
Right.
To speed it up.
Mm.
And hence the boulder to
Yeah.
and hence the circles who can start pushing internally, and hence the unstereotyping in advertising and images. I mean, imagine if we get to a place where every image that is out there is really showing truly a gender equal world.
Yeah.
Then we can all imagine it.
We're visual animals.
And so the 217 years could be cut like this
Yes.
into a time that you and I could see this in our lifetime. In truth, I didn't think we'd ever see a black president in the US.
But
in
we
our
did,
lifetime.
right?
We did.
Wow.
So we didn't think that we would see free South Africa and a Mandela walking. We saw it.
We saw it, yeah.
So we could see gender equality in our lifetime, but it
Yes.
will take some real big steps, bold steps that are breaking, huge barriers and breaking stereotypes.
Yeah.
Norms and stereotypes have to shift. How people think, their unconscious bias has to shift, or we're not going to be able to move. And we start, yes, at the household.
Yeah.
And we found that many of these champions and CEOs of companies will not change the organization until they've made the change in their own household.
In their own home.
In themselves.
True, true.
And one of them came out and actually said he signed up for He for She, and he went home one day and for the first time realized that his household was very unequal. And he had to start changing that situation because he'd never paid attention to that.
True, true.
And so starting to shift it in the household, you've got to model it so you can model it in the workplace.
So you can model it in the workplace. I think also within the household, and some of the things that we obviously see is the way that we buy our children toys, right? So it's a dolly for the girl and it's a car for the boy. It's something more mechanical for the boy, and yet for the girl you're giving her something more of a vanity toy.
Yeah, and where has that come from?
Yeah.
Those are stereotypes that have been built out. Those are ads that are put.
Yeah.
This
That's
is the
how
way
they're marketing to
it.
us, yeah?
That's right. So you walk into the store and you test it with a little girl. And I mean, we've got some ads that are really just looking at what the little children do. And they automatically just, something to say about genes, but I think ultimately they just drift off to those things because this is what they've been seeing.
Yeah.
This is what's seen. I mean, when I've been in the hospital giving birth, I would wake up in the morning and my room is pink because my daughter's pink. I'm like, who asked for this pinkness?
Who asked for this pinkness? That's
Yeah,
right.
give me white.
Yes.
Or, I don't know, cream.
That's right.
Let's just unstereotype it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Stereotypes have such a hold on us as human beings, and that's not great. We need to change. So I'm just having a quick look at some of the comments that are coming through here. We had quite a lot of comments and activities, etc. Here's one I'm just going to read out to you. Many leadership succession pipelines have more men in the
That's
pool
right.
than women. It is now a conscious effort. Conscious efforts are being made to make provision for women. Some organizations are changing this narratives. Women now need to be included, and I'm a terrible reader, right? So let me start again. Women are now being included, but still not in the required numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fact.
Gender parity is what we're talking about. And I'll give you an example. The UN decided, the new Secretary General Antonio Guterres took a decision to unstereotype this issue of leadership and create gender parity. So, the way the UN is, we've got UN Women, you've got UNICEF, you've got, UN Environment, you've got, UNDP, and you've got World Food Program and World Health Organization, and all, there's many, many UN agencies.
That's right.
And for the longest time, we had a handful of women in the most senior positions. And he took a decision when he came in last year that he would have gender parity at the highest level of the UN.
You're right.
We are now, I don't know the exact number, but we are over 50% women at the helm of every single UN agency. UNAIDS is a woman, and
Wow.
the UNAIDS has just made there's a woman now. UN Women is the head. UNFPA and many organizations are now led by women.
Intentionally.
And with that intentionally, and we're drilling it down throughout the organization. And so if you don't have a leader who just takes the decision that succession planning will include 50% men and 50% women, you know. President Ramaphosa here just announced and ensured that the new cabinet is 50-50 in South Africa.
Right.
President in Ethiopia,
Right.
Prime Minister made the announcement, appointed a woman president, and appointed 50-50 cabinet, just like that.
Just like that.
Rwanda is the same.
Yes.
We have 3 African countries which have led the way. Seychelles had a woman president before.
Right.
Mauritius, sorry. But, you know, so it can be done.
It can be done.
It's a decision, and it's just really having the commitment for the leader.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Then you smash that glass.
And then it
ceiling.
normalizes it.
Yeah.
Because part of the issue we have is people asking questions like, can a woman lead? I mean, but in the countries where we have this 50-50 cabinet,
Right.
and you know, South Africa has been a good example. We've had women ministers of intelligence, women ministers of defense, women ministers of mines and energy and transport and foreign affairs and everywhere. It's not the stereotypical ones that are only relegated to women.
That's
Finance,
right.
you know. So that starts breaking it. So you can start imagining a CEO or a minister of finance or a, you know, the JSE in South Africa is led by a woman.
That's right.
The CEO, the CFO, COO, all women in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange.
Right.
It can be done.
It can be done.
That's right.
It starts at an individual level,
Yeah.
and then it goes to a company level, and then at a continent level.
But we want the leaders.
You want
Make
the leaders.
Make the decision and lead from in front.
That's it. Wow. Powerful way to end this. We've had some online questions. I think we will be responding to those after this session. Thank you very much for your time, and
Thanks to you.
learned a lot from a business, learned a lot from a branding perspective, and also learned a lot from a parenting perspective.
So let's talk to LinkedIn.
Right.
LinkedIn, we are looking for partners for our Stereotype Alliance.
Right.
We want companies across the world to take the decision to unstereotype everything we do.
Yeah.
So that we really work together to build a gender equal world.
True. True.
It's a benefit to all of us, to our children, and we owe it to them, to our grandchildren as they come.
That's it. I mean, we can definitely help. We lead with data, as always, making data available that shows what is happening in the world. So happy to have had you on this.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you very much for at least giving us time, and for those who are joining us online, you've had an opportunity to hear, to learn, and to see what your role is in terms of changing the narrative and changing the world that we operate in.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure, Anne. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stuart.
All right then, thank you, and we'll see you again when we stream again.